Welcome to episode 171 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with Steve Conley from the Boston Red Sox on making the career jump from tech to data.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who loves working with teams around the world who need sleep, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and you are listening to Sports Geek. You might be doing that on your favourite podcast player, but you also might be doing it at sportsgeekhq.com. I'm always fascinated when I get in the libsyn stats of the podcast to find how many people are actually just listening on the website. Appreciate you doing so if you've just done it recently or if you've been listening for a couple of years, and you might recognise the voice of my guest this week. Steve Conley works at the Boston Red Sox and has for many a year. I've known Steve for a long while through our association with the Seed Conference. He was actually on the podcast way back on episode 14 when I had a few of the people at Seat, and then it was Kansas City in 2013. And was really looking forward to getting Steve back on the podcast since I've recently caught up with him in Seat Atlanta and talked to him about the career change that he's gone through in that time, going from the IT tech side of the business to working in the data or the data side for my US friends, working in the CRM and looking at that side of the business. So wanted to discuss with him how he went about it, making that move, and what he's found out and figured out so far. So thanks again. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy my chat with Steve Conley from the Boston Red Sox. Very happy to have a good friend of mine, Steve Conley, Director of Data Services at the Boston Red Sox. Welcome to the podcast, mate.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We've got past our technical difficulties of actually getting connected. Here, I'm recording this on a Saturday morning, and you're spending a little bit of your Friday night for the chat. So thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I've been a frequent listener for a long time, so.
And if people have been a listener, and if they go back in the archives, you were actually on episode 14 way back in 2013 when we recorded a bit of a seat get together in Kansas City. You can't hear on the podcast where I have the crutches next to me. That was one of my first many injury runs at Seat. So it's great to have you actually on the podcast for an actual proper chat.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. I was trying to get through my history on that, and where you remember things probably accurately because you did it, I was tying that to Seat Boston, and I was like, oh, I thought I was on this before, or I would have said long time, first time, but I knew I was there. We did you were just launching it. It was, and I've been listening ever since. So.
Yes. So for history, I obviously know Steve from a long association with the Seed Conference. In 2012, it was in Boston, and then 2013 it was in Kansas City, and I turned up with Achilles injury and crutches, and I just started the podcast. I think I was maybe 6 or 8 episodes in. Recorded a bit of a roundtable podcast then. Talking to people, and then it's sort of grown. It's grown from there. So, enough about me and enough about the history of the podcast. You've been at the Red Sox since 2001.
Correct.
So let's take us through a bit of your history of your time at the Red Sox, so we can get into your current role.
Sure. And when I started with the Red Sox, 2001, the team was. It was up for sale. So, and I was working for a company that was right at that point in time doing staff augmentation and trying to work on that whole IT pyramid concept and capture that .com bubble that burst. So I was like, I had come in probably at the top of their game, and I felt like the Grim Reaper because the company just starts going down, and I was redoing the network, and all I was doing was closing offices,
Yep.
And things weren't looking well on the balance sheet, and I had a connection back, like how things work in networking and keeping in touch with people. My college, the college that I went to, is Northeastern University in Boston.
Yep.
And it was the first job that I had, and one of the partners that I made a really good connection with, partner in charge of tax at the time, ended up being the COO of the Red Sox. And they knew that they needed to update their baseline IT before they sold the team. So I was just kind of going in and was like, all right, well, I can do another year or so, figure out what'll happen from there. It'll be good to have that logo on my resume. And after the team gets sold, we'll see what happens. But I went in with the concept of this is a short-term gig, and now I'm still here. And
so you were in that role, and again, so when I met you, whether it was at I most likely met you at Seat 2011 in Los Angeles, and then definitely when you were hosting in 2012, you're in that IT role through that whole phase of when tech started really taking a hold of sports, and the whole stadium Wi-Fi, DAS, bringing the tech into the stadiums, who pays for it. You worked with the Red Sox and obviously Fenway around that whole piece, and through that whole I guess technology renaissance, if we want to put it that way, where tech was getting rolled out, and there was that conundrum of how does it get paid for, how does it get rolled out, what do the fans, what can we roll out?
Right. And yeah, definitely. And at that point in time, I had that moment that probably everybody in sports gets when you first walk in the door, and you like, I walk in and I'm like, oh, it's the Red Sox. They have to have like bottomless, a bottomless budget. Things got to be like the best equipment, and I walked in and it was a network, essentially circa 1995, and not everybody had email. They had, there were still typewriters in the office.
Yeah.
When you wanted to order something, you had to put a form in triplicate. It was just a whole sleepy organization that just ran the business of baseball, and shut their doors in the winter and then rolled them back up in the spring. That's kind of oversimplifying it, but it was, from that concept, it wasn't a technology-driven company. And making the transition, so we went from, neutral to 100 miles an hour when the team was sold.
Yep.
And we started the process of renovating Fenway Park, and just enabling IT throughout the process. So I wouldn't say I had the, I didn't work on building a brand new ballpark, but for 10 years, I built the brand new ballpark one Lego piece at a time. It's
very much a challenge for those older stadiums. It's a challenge for Fenway. Similarly, for the guys in Chicago with Wrigley, it's like you're not going to go and tear it down. So it's like, well, how do you retrofit? How do you get that tech into the stadium without, you can't disrupt the games. The main product is the game on the field, but how do you continually add those pieces? So it was a bit of, like you said, brick by brick, rolling out a little bit of tech here, a little bit of tech there, upgrading suites and upgrading concourses, that kind of thing.
Yeah, like you think about just some of the core bones of the infrastructure. Number one being the fiber throughout the building, and I probably cut and recut every piece of fiber there 10 times. The way that we designed our fiber ring, we designed it segmented because you knew that it was going to, one section of the stadium was going to get ripped, like completely gutted, and then you would have to re-put it in. So we did it from that standpoint. And when it first opened up in 2001, we didn't have like things as simple as cable trays.
Yep.
So now, like, after 10 years, the first thing I do when I walk into any stadium is I'm walking around. I'm always looking up. It's just how did they manage all their cable through the building? Some of that's, that's just something you can't unlearn.
Yeah, I think I recently saw a photo. A good friend of ours, Todd Cafflish, who didn't like all the wiring in his house and had to completely rewire it and line it and get all those cables in the right position. It's pretty much, you've done it that often, it's what you first look at when you're looking at stadiums and implementations. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And, we were not only the stadium stuff, we did some really innovative stuff in the beginning with baseball, specifically around, player video, player practice video. So we were the first team to travel with a server that was capturing at-bat information that a player could go back and look at, and, video coaching. We were able to put a couple of things together there that were, pretty neat. And some of it was, we were still in the phase of we're small, trying new things, and just, throw something against the wall and see if it works. So, and sometimes that would be your own worst enemy. We got in 2004, we had the first travel system. It was the year that we, won the World Series, but the end of the year, that system, it's a big, it's a long season.
Yep.
So X amount of flights, having a whole, it's essentially traveling with a network that wasn't designed to travel.
Yeah.
And by the end of the year, it was, spit and baling wire holding that thing together. So we were, made some adjustments, and even we were the first team traveling with the sand. So when we first traveled with that, I'm sure the visiting clubhouse guys hated us.
Yeah.
And part of the,
go. Sorry, go.
Sorry, and the other things are our video guy carried an array of super long extension cords because he knew he would blow circuits left and right in different places. So he knew where all the circuits were and all the and all the visiting clubhouses to make the system work. Just simple things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's always been one of my insights, chatting with the IT folk, and again, as been lucky to meet and chat with a bunch of you guys and girls that are in the IT side, is that I come at it from a fan engagement point of view. What's it for the fans? But there's so much of the IT and the tech that's being rolled out is for the operations side. So for the like you said there, the player tracking or the at-bat tracking and for the coaching, which is that's the technology advantage for your clubhouse. That it's that if you can roll that out, and if video analysis that you produce can help get one or two more wins or increase on base percentage, or those kind of things actually affect winning on the field. That's where a lot of the innovation is also happening on the tech side, in both the ballparks and then practice facilities and those kind of things. So it's a strong focus, but it's a focus that you can't. I've spoken to a lot of you. You're not going to come and talk about it on the podcast because it's a competitive IP advantage that the clubs have rolling out some of that tech.
Right. But this was stuff that was everybody does it now.
Yeah,
right?
No, exactly. Yeah.
So, but we're, it was one of the things that, I think we were a little bit ahead of the curve, and, it helps, right? Anything that helps. And then you're part of the thing that's just, it's hard to explain when you until you run through it working in sports, is, I love technology. I've, always loved doing tech stuff all my life, but, I've been a diehard sports fan, and I probably should filter that as I'm a diehard Boston sports fan.
Yep.
And I think there really is a significant difference here. So even back in college, we had one exercise we're working on, what do we want to do when you grow up or whatever. And I one of the guys that I'm still in touch with, he remembered. He was like, yeah, back in that class, you're the one that said you want to do the network stuff for the Red Sox.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I guess I did, and one of the, my capstone project before, it was like, now it's a much bigger thing at Northeastern, but you had to write a big paper, research paper, the whole thing.
Yep.
And the paper that I did was, this was when Boston Garden was about to get a new Boston Garden was going to get built,
yep.
or the old one was going to be renovated. And I wrote a whole thing about, why it should be renovated and what processes would be to go through it, make sure that it would become a modern facility. I went down to City Hall, looked at all the plans that were submitted. It was, it was fun, but it was just like when you go and experience an old stadium and some of it, there's things, there's drawbacks, it's, you're sitting there, there's poles and whatever that some people are going to be behind. But the reason those support structures are so close is the upper deck is sitting on top of the field or on top of the ice. So,
yep.
There's more history to it, so I'm like, one of the things I'm more thankful than anything is like our new ownership group, saving Fenway Park, and, making it the jewel it is. It's a, you walk in and that it's an icon.
Yeah. I mean, I've said previously, lucky enough to go to a game at Fenway, in 2012, around seat, and you can just feel the history when you walk in. It just has that feel, and it's very hard to manufacture. There's some terrific new stadiums that are being built across multiple sports, and they're trying to reenact that. But sometimes it's you can't actually mess with the real deal.
Right. And you look at some of the things that, the reason the wall's there is not because they said, oh, this is a nice place for a wall. It's because there's a street,
yeah.
And some of the, we did a lot of innovative things when we were renovating. And, some of them are just like we turned the city street into part of the concourse.
Yep.
And that's great until you'd say, okay, well, now I need to make access control work.
Yep.
And, the way that you want to make access control work flawlessly is you hardwire all your turnstiles. Well, our turnstiles are getting dragged in and dragged out 81 times a year. Now you got to make it, you got to make that, back of house Wi-Fi 100% reliable. So there was, the challenges that went on with that stuff. It was, every year something new. So
I want to make the transition from the Geek Talk and you in the IT role to your current role of Director of Data Services. So take us through that move and how that came about, and and just I guess that move initially, and then what we can sort of dive in on what you've learned so far.
Okay, so it was part of it was hard, right?
Yep.
So we recognized, IT didn't have a seat at the table.
Yep.
Right. They were, I guess, the tech, the term in consulting would be, we're like a valued partner, not a strategic partner, or what,
Mm-hmm.
it's like
yep.
providing the lights. And I knew like there was a number of things that we were missing. And a lot of it was in how our CRM piece, our development staff wasn't there. And I, pushed for staffing, and it first time was just trying to get an extra developer. And, the business decision was to bring in, someone from like the Big Six type environment and run and split operations and development and, have them, bring that up. So then I was just back on operations only. And that went for about a year, and that hire didn't work out. But, and we decided the company decided they wanted a VP of IT and just revamp IT and become become a strategic partner to
Yep.
the business. And, I went for that job, didn't get it. And, part of the thing is, when you don't get that spot, there was definitely some pieces where I was like, oh, God, I got,
Bit of what am I doing here? Where am I going? That sort of that career sort of inward looking.
Yes, exactly. And it was during the 2003 season when that happened. And then the beginning of the 2003 season, I don't know if you remember, there was the Boston Marathon bombing.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was that was a special season for us as a team. And so I had made a decision, was like, I'm just going to see this through this year. 'Cause the marathon, I've run the marathon 7 times. At that point in time, I had run it 6 and I thought I was done.
Yeah.
And, I've lived when I was in college, Northeastern, any of the colleges in Boston that are on the marathon route, that it's like a holiday. It's hard to explain. The baseball game's at 11 o'clock.
Yep.
So that it was designed to, the crowds would roll out and support the runners going by. And the team in the city, like when you have a team that's successful and just the way the city came together, and you're a small part of it, it's really, it's hard to explain, but you get caught up in it. And it was just like, all right, I'm not going to walk away from this for my own, petty reasons.
Yeah.
And, but at the same time, you can go into, some of these conversations where you're like, you think you're Michael Corleone and you realize that everybody else thinks you're Fredo. And
Mm-hmm.
you're like, so at that point in time, I was like, all right, so I, just started to float like what it would be, what my career options were. And there were still a lot of good options out in the industry, but for me, I was like, you can take a compass and do a 10-mile circle around the place that I was born, and I haven't moved since,
Yep.
So I'm kind of really got deep roots here, got family here. So it was like, I'm not gonna move away from Boston. We're established in this area. And then, so if you say, I'm not going to move here, you look through the industry and there's not a ton of options if you like going across the industry. So then you start looking outside of, outside of sports and operations at that point in time, things are coming up, cloud's going crazy. That it's not like being really good with network and infrastructure is important, but it wasn't what it was back in 2001.
Yeah, and it's not in the sports, like as we discussed earlier, the sports stadium piece and it's super unique. It's not, hey, we understand that the network infrastructure for a mall or a large building has its issues, but most of the time you're not worried about where the cables are going because they just go in the roof or they go in the wall, and it's designed that way. So it's a really unique skill set. So, but the thing is, we've had stacks of conversations over the years, both at Seat and outside of Seat, is that I found, at Seat we've got the 3 tracks of the IT, the CRM and the data sort of track, and then the digital track. You seem to have always gravitated to at least the conversation, catching up and having the conversations to understand those other tracks. Is that where the sort of the peaking of the interest to go, well, you were seeing, well, I'm seeing what all these other teams or leagues are doing in the data space, and is that sort of if we take the Gretzky term, sort of move where the puck is, and you sort of said, I want to sort of start playing in this space because it looks interesting?
Yeah, and a number of reasons for that, because one, doing a self-assessment, and you're like, where your strengths and your weaknesses are, and where you have gaps, and it's like, I had a whole lot more to learn on the data track or the CRM track than I did, on Wi-Fi, like, or any of the other, like, it's stuff that interests me, and like I would definitely go to those sessions, but I would gain so much more insight out of the things that other clubs are doing that were innovative on the fan-facing piece.
Yep.
And it's finding what your passion is. And I'm like, for me, it was like I knew I needed to make a change. And then one of the things, like, when I didn't get the job, I was like, I was in a tough spot, but I got lucky because, the guy that they hired was probably the best guy I've ever worked for. And one of the things he sat down and was like, listen, let's just help me get through this season. Cause he started in the middle of 2013.
Yep.
And, so I did the same role, and then we sat down afterwards, and, he set a process where he, like, brought someone in as a mentor, had them do an assessment across the office, give you, like, and then have the long, the tough conversation where you're like, okay, these are all the things that are good, and here's a couple of stones you got to work on.
Yep.
And these are the and having those frank conversations, that doesn't happen every day, right? So,
no, it doesn't.
And then he was like, what we need to become is a data-driven company, and we don't have a data group. So, here's the opportunity.
Yeah.
So, and you don't get an opportunity like that every day, right? It's like a green field, build this stuff. And, so we had, we're building a data group. We had no data architect. We had, I've had the last data class I had was back in the 90s.
Yeah. But the thing is, and, I mention it, when people ask my background as sports geek, and even though I'm not doing as much, I'm not full on coding as I was for the first 15 years of my career, I see tremendous advantage as a digital marketer and what I'm doing in the space on that technology development, coding type background, because I can still talk to geeks. I still understand, the tech that's being rolled out in a software or a website, that kind of thing.
Right.
You've got there's an mountain of knowledge you've got on the tech side, the implementation side, and how things are rolled out, that it's super applicable. Are you seeing, what lessons and what advantages are you seeing coming to data from an IT background? Because again, most people in that space are, the data geeks, and they're slicing and dicing, data and data warehouses and doing queries to understand the data, and they've got a better understanding of big data. But you're coming to it from a technical implementation side. Do you think that gives you an advantage to knowing that side of the equation?
Oh, it definitely does. And, even from the standpoint of, all the way through my career, even back before baseball, it's usually when an application didn't work, the developers would always say it's the network, or if something was slow, it's the network. Like, I knew, like, I could eliminate that as it's not the network, because I know how that works, right? And it's also just being the thing that got me, the hardest thing for me to adjust to was the time frame for moving, getting things done, right? Because getting things done right in a network, building a network from scratch, is you do your research, you make a decision, you buy the stuff, and you put it in.
Yep.
And on the data side is, you want to build a star schema, you got to analyze all this stuff. And, like, it's not something like, okay, then you build the queries. Well, it's not, it doesn't happen overnight. And it takes a longer time to see results. And we're trying to start this process up. So it was like knowing what people wanted and just finding out, get a couple of quick wins, and some of that, we were able to do that. And, and I still had a good background in our CRM environment.
Yep.
Because, but our CRM environment, and I've seen this and had this conversation with, a ton of people in the industry, is data warehouse wasn't even a term.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, you got to put this information in your CRM. And we just took all this ticketing data and all this fan data and just jammed it into a CRM system that wasn't designed to hold that amount of data.
Yep.
And then we're like looking around going, why is it so slow?
Yeah.
And it was like, so since we put in CRM, we've probably blown it up, 4 times, like four complete reiterations. And, we're just continuing to improve and just slim it down, put it on a diet, make it the targeting tool that you need to do.
Yeah. So that is a good point, because everyone is on some sort of data journey. Like everyone's reaching for a goal, reaching for that holy grail of that 360-degree view of all your customers. But it's not a click of the fingers and we installed the product and turned it on and you're good to go. It does take I guess several evolutions. Do you want to take us through a little bit of the tech you are playing with? What is the back end? What are some of the tools that you're using as part of what you're doing?
Sure, we're a little bit of a hybrid approach right now. So,
and that's I think everyone is a little bit of a hybrid approach. Like again, it's like the holy grail. Everyone would love to be the one vendor that covers the complete end to end, but it doesn't exist. It's always this maze of lines of we get this data from here and it gets imported by an API, and this one someone has to upload, and this one gets couriered to us and then we upload it. Like it's always a bit of a hybrid. But as best you can say, what are some of the pieces of your puzzle?
So the crown jewels of your ticketing data, right? So we have a replicated ticketing system, which any TDC customer is, and that's a Oracle server. And like the first step that we do is we made a decision to go on a Microsoft stack. So we stage that data, move it over to a Microsoft staging environment, and then transform it to a star schema.
Yep.
And in addition, take in a number of feeds from BAM and Axiom data pens, and just kind of get a better one view of the customer.
Yep.
And in addition to that, we made a decision to go with a company called Fan Manager, which I'm sure you're aware of, and they take a lot of the same type of feeds.
Yep.
And integrate to our CRM environment.
Yep.
So they do the pass through to our CRM environment and help us with our targeting and campaign management on that front.
Yep.
So, and then what we've built, the real part that's kept me awake for the past 6 months working with my data architect is what we're building is essentially what we call MDM, right? Master Data Management for our fans. And what we're doing is layering that on top of our data warehouse and our fan manager implementation and our CRM implementation. So it's every touch point for a fan. So it's a skeleton key basically for if you're a fan in this system, you're connected to this system, and trying to expose our data issues, which are significant. So,
and that's again trying to pull in all of these disparate sources and get them all talking to one another and saying, yes, this is Sean. He is signed up on the email, and then he did buy a ticket, and then he did use our app, and then he entered a sponsors competition. You're trying to pull all those threads together into that one piece.
Yes, and we've made a lot of progress on that. And in fact, I see this year we were talking about there's one panel I probably regret more than anything else is because I didn't have the correct data in front of me.
Yep.
When we were talking about sending in emails and it came across incorrectly. So, baseball is tied to BAM, and all of our outbound communication and things like that are tied to them.
As mentioned by the New York Times recently, a little known tech company. I don't know if you saw that headline.
I did.
BAM. I'm like, come on, New York Times. That makes, New York Times, quaint little newspaper from New York. So BAM. It is this sports technology behemoth, but Disney is apparently betting on little known companies. So yes, apologies, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. And like, the relationship with these guys is it's complicated, but it's improved so much in the last couple of years.
Yep.
Where we had a collaborative approach of being able to share data and things like that. And I know what I was trying to say is because there are governor, if you will, in regards to making sure we don't go wide open and just hit our mailing list 100 times.
Yep.
If you ask our executives, they're like, email, send it, go, email, send it, right? Because they just want to pull that one lever.
But it's about having nuance in that lever, because you can't send that to that email to 100,000 people and expect the same results. When if your data is if your data is better, and that the 20,000 that you're going to send it to are actually interested in it, they're in the demographic, that's what the data teams and your team are trying to solve and fight that fight to both with executives or whoever is saying, I'm sure you're trying to eradicate the term, send out an email blast.
Right. So, but here's the thing, right? Yep. So we're, the perception is we're sending too much, right? We know, and there's a couple of things where, we would get, feedback from the, our season ticket holders as, hey, you're killing me with this. And I had one piece of information that I hadn't verified. So, so I hadn't done all my homework.
Yep.
And I said something incorrect, right? So I definitely regret that.
You can correct it. You can correct it here, and make the statement that you wanted to make, or at least, make the statement, that you wanted to make now.
So what happens is it's more on the bad data, right? So look, we're pulling in our, the feed that BAM gives us now is like our RU database, which is like people salivate over it because we have 300,000 emails that are collected that you can, when there's how many people are opted in. So what happens, and it's especially when you get an older demographic, which a lot of our season ticket holders are, right? They're, they're opted in multiple times.
Yep.
And, until we used our tools to figure out the dedupe process, we didn't realize how bad it was. And now you got to look at it as how do you fix it? We haven't figured that piece out, but we're building the piece to expose it. And it was funny. I was having these, reports put together by my Northeastern co-op, and her parents are season ticket holders. And so I was like, okay, well, do me a favor, just validate how many, messages your mom gets, a month, and see how we're doing. Because I know that we're only sending, a small amount.
Yeah.
But she's getting 90.
Yeah.
A month, right? So it's 3 a day. And it's why? And she's opted in on 4 different emails. And then, so it's can you do me a favor? Just ask her why. And she's like, well, she doesn't know which one to opt out of, and she just ignores it and kind of, because she knows she just wants one email, and
But she doesn't want. But she's also that customer that goes, if I turn one off, they'll all stop, and I still want to get my communications.
Exactly.
And it's just it's that persona thing. So that over 55, email is still their primary comms. They don't know, and they might have multiple emails, or they're not quite sure. And going to a big unsubscribe page that says, "Here's the 16 things you've opted in for over the journey. Which ones don't you want?" It's terribly confusing. So that's
right. And then it's also with multiple emails too, right? So you're okay, it's. I don't have an answer for it, but I definitely know that the way I presented it was incorrect, and definitely apologize, but it's definitely a problem that we have and we need to fix. And, it's not, it was, I was trying to,
because there is a bit of a falling in love with the size of the database as opposed to the quality of the database, and it's mainly because there's not a metric that jumps out. Like, it's easy to say 500,000 emails as opposed to this many engaged, because it's always a smaller number and everyone goes to the bigger number. But there's real value in saying, oh, we're sending out this email in the off season just to check in how you are. If you don't want to get our emails, we're cool with that. We still know you support our team, but you can click this and not get them.
Right.
And then you end up with a higher quality list. The open rates go up. It sends the appropriate signals to all the mail servers out there because people are opening those emails so they don't get marked as spam. Like, I get I'm registered with every pro team. I get all of the emails. Gmail puts them into a nice box that says Sports Biz, and I check my spam every now and again. And some teams are ending up there. Now, I'm not marking them as spam, but some people must be, and so that becomes a problem. The more people that then mark it as spam, then it affects your open rates across the board. So, but it's a bold it's a bold strategy if I go and quote Anchorman to go and say, I want to get rid of 100,000 of our emails because they're not engaged. Because at the C level, they're like, but that's really important. Or our commercial team is selling the fact that we've got this big database, when it's more about the higher end, more engaged customer that's important. And I think as you develop those reports and understand that, because we've done the same thing with a couple of teams where they did the assessment and went, wow, we are sending too many emails and people aren't opening them. So what happens if we send less emails? And and testing that, you've got to follow the data.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have all those tools, right? So it's definitely, we're in a much better place than we were. Are we perfect? No. But the other thing is it's a huge data set, and you start looking at it, it's like, it starts to, we got to become more efficient with it. And it takes time. And then once you identify a problem, it's like, the way sports works, especially, the works here for the Reds, is like, okay, let's go fix it now. Once a decision's made, the implementation, setting the expectations and getting the correct requirements and, getting everybody on the same page is not there. So that's why I was like, big, hairy, ugly goal for us, right? Yep. Is just know every fan in the ballpark within 5 years, and to be able to, and that's a
big goal. And I guess the question I've got for that is, because we've talked about the older generation and market that are in your database that have subscribed. They're getting too many emails because maybe using multiple emails, but that is their primary source.
Right.
If you're looking at that big hairy goal, what do you do for the under 24s that seem to be using email less and less? And like, that's not a platform, and we might end up with current 15, 16, 17-year-olds in the next 5 years they just might never check email. Where does that? Yes. I mean, talk about things that keep data guys awake at night. What are you trying to? Where's the plan, or at least what are you trying to project to find out how you get that data and potentially communicate with those types of fans?
Well, some of the things it's getting. We've created a Red Sox Kids Nation, a Red Sox Nation, a student not we have this program that's really started to take off, is the Student 9 program. So, and you opt in. When we saw it really take off this year a little bit, where last minute ticket purchases, where you can opt in and get a text that, hey, tickets are available. Come to tonight's game, and make it the thing that's really happening with that generation is a lot of them
is on demand.
On demand. The buying habits have changed, right? Yep. So, and that's what, it makes things so much more difficult. Like, someone's more willing to take that risk of, I don't want to buy a 3-game pack, that when they come out on sale to guarantee me that one Yankee game, when, I may, it might be raining that day, or it might be a little bit colder, and I might be able to get, a better deal on the secondary market.
Yep.
Or I'll take that risk and I'll have to pay more. So we've seen, I think, in the industry that the secondary market has kind of really changed the buying habits, and the technology available to people has changed the buying habits of students. So it's like, how do you keep that primary market engaged? And some of it is just like text that, tickets are available, low cost for our students. So $9 tickets for students that are opted into the program. But once it really, some of the things they have to, we haven't really, figured this out yet. And it's not we haven't even started pulling any data specifically to that. But like in the back of my mind is like, once you get very successful with it, it becomes real easy to keep hitting that button.
Yeah.
Right. And then, when's that last time? When's the time that you hit that button once too often?
Yep.
Right. And
it's like turning the faucet off. It's like, well, hang on. Every time we turn that faucet on, money comes out. Why would we stop doing it? And that, especially that demographic, that younger, like they don't want to be sold to. They don't particularly like ads. They want it to feel like they're in control. And so I think it is a combination, like you said there, a combination of, app engagement, the content that you're doing to sort of bring them in. I think mobile's their primary point of record as opposed to email.
Right.
And then potentially, where this chat sort of infrastructure sort of fits in, because they might prefer to be get a message via a chatbot, whether it be Messenger or WeChat or WhatsApp, that just says, here's the game. Oh, just reply back. Have you got a ticket? Yes, click. And I think that's stuff that BAM is doing. We all use the at Ballpark app to which becomes a data play, but it's also that ticketing play. And again, it's
get everybody to digital, right?
Get everybody to digital. They're used to hitting the button to get an Uber. They're hitting the button to get some food delivered. You've got to put your sport in that same space. And the beauty of digital is you start getting cleaner and better data. Like, even if someone has 7 emails, you'll be able to start saying, well, this is the account they keep ordering from. That's the primary record. That's the one we want to talk to. And
exactly.
And your challenge at the other end is to migrate the silver surfers, as I like to call them, the older generation that's just getting on the internet. Get them into understanding how to use digital and how much easier it is, and that sort of solves some of your problems. So
and the tough part on that side is getting them to realize that it is easier, because once you get your tickets into a digital format, it's so much easier to manage.
Yeah.
So I guess like that, part of that goal, right? We have these conversations about, it's like, why, when you give, like, I'm an Amazon Prime member, right? So I know, like, when I search on the web and we buy stuff on Amazon, they're going to feed me ads based on their what all my search critiques are and things like that. So, and they'll serve up stuff that they think is in your best interest. And, 9 times out of 10, they're right. Right.
Yep.
So, I'm willing to, or Disney gives you that magic band thing, so how do you get that same type? Because I don't think that, the younger generation they're not fans. I think that's completely wrong. I think they're just as passionate. They're just have a different way to reach, right? So it's like, find what works with them.
And they consume it completely different, whereas, your dad and my dad would sit down and watch a whole game. And that's what they would do every time their favorite team would play, whereas, our generation would watch and go and still understand the whole season ticket and that kind of thing. But now we're moving to, yes, I want to be a fan. My son's a fan of the same sports I am. But he just goes to the game, and that's how he consumes, or he'll consume the content differently. So it's just the consumer behaviour in how they're consuming it and how they want to purchase it and how they want to show their fandom is changing. And so that's the piece that sports needs to evolve. And I think tech plays a really good play in bringing that all together. But it's still something that a lot of sports are looking at, and especially around the ticketing piece around how do we get the cheeks in the seats? How do we still get people there? Because it's still, that's the primary goal of, a lot of the work you're doing in the data side is to make sure that you're still getting those people turning up and continuing to solve that problem.
Right. And, I'm lucky at who we are, right? So we're blessed. I have this conversation with Wade at the Twins a lot. And some of the things, I'll say we came up with the term as like first world problems.
Exactly.
Anybody, if I did my complaints about too much data, too much this, too much that, how do you manage this kind of stuff? I can't deal with all this extra interest. And other clubs are like, I'm just trying to sell out. They're dealing on it with a different level. So I don't want to come across as like, we're blessed at who we are. I think we realize it, but it doesn't mean that you don't want to get better, right? So,
yeah, and it's also. You don't want to rest on your laurels because the easiest thing to do is to go, we are the Red Sox. We do have, super support in Boston. And you could still go back to the days when you started. It's like, well, if we just rolled out baseball, people would turn up.
Right.
But if you're not moving with the consumer and moving to where they're going, at some point, those consumers just won't turn up.
Exactly.
So you've got to always be looking to innovate and engage your customer, keep them involved, and do the things that keep them as passionate as your current fan base. A lot of sports these days have that older season ticket base that are of a different generation that as they get older they won't they won't be there, and so what does the next generation of fans look like? Because it won't be exactly the same. So, the mix of, different packages or single games, how the secondary market plays out, especially in the US. That's pretty much what the next 5 to 10 years are going to look like, especially on the ticketing side.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing that's going to be like, and this is way above my pay grade, but it's just something I like keeping an eye on is what's happening, because it's tied to the next generation too, is what's happening on the broadcasting rights and things like that. Because, I don't think that you look at one of the things that's always on the radio now is just like the numbers are down for NFL or whatever. Yep. And I don't think that the interest is down, or that I just think it's how people are a big factor is that, streaming's become a bigger play. There's other things that are
there's so many more entertainment options available now. We've got, gone from 10 years ago having, a couple of regional networks and, regional radio, those kind of things, to far more national players, far more digital players.
Right.
We've got Amazon obviously dipping their toe into the space. We've got Facebook doing the same. We've got Apple just sitting there with buckets of cash.
Right.
They can just come along and just say, well, we want all of these games and they're all going to be on our devices. So we don't know how that's going to play out. But then the other side of it is, we could see this all break up, and the broadcast and the ticketing and the live experience, they might all come back together. Like it might be that you buy your digital with your tickets and you become a season ticket, and that's a new product that is sort of not really available at the minute with the structure of the rights and those kind of things. But there's these new products that could evolve with the different partners.
Yeah, and it's, again, it's way above my pay grade, right? But I think it's from a, just a sports fan and like a historical part of sports. I think it's history repeating itself in a number of ways where, when baseball first became, when radio first became a medium. Yep. Baseball was really reluctant to. They didn't think they'd get fans if they put their games on radio. Yeah. And then they had the same issue with TV.
Yeah, we'll put it on delay, otherwise people won't go. Yeah.
Right. So, and it's it's just a different medium. And you look back, and I bet you some of the same, angst that we're having over what's going to happen with it is, they had back in the day.
Yeah.
So
and like, I understand you're saying it's not really, it's in your, not in your wheelhouse as far as what you're doing, but you whether you're in, the digital side of the business, the data side of the business, the tech, you've got to be keeping an interest on where these trends potentially are going to go, because it's going to vastly change what your role is. It's going to have a dramatic effect on what your role is if that landscape changes. So,
exactly.
So it's, you may not be in the decision-making process, but you want to be able to start at least potentially hedging your bets in different directions to say, well, if this goes down this path, we need to set up some infrastructure that starts capturing these people, because they're the people that will potentially take up that product. And so, that's, when you have those, the big, hairy, ugly goals, and you say, here's what 5 years looks like, you've sort of got to start a few different, a few different streams to say, well, we're going to put a bit of money on all of these horses. One of them might come off. None of them might come off, but it's sort of, again, hedging your bets.
Right. Yeah. And, it's kind of back to where we talked about. It was like, just because it's not something I have a ton of influence, or it's in my wheelhouse, it's not something I'm not interested in and paying attention to. And that was similar when I was doing, infrastructure stuff. I still was interested in, the data, the CRM, the like fan engagement, and like, because it was all really like interesting and neat and cool. And I'm totally into technology. So you have to adapt. And it was, don't adapt.
Yeah, exactly. And it was the pipeline for everything in the IT space. I mean, that was my discussion with, with Christine after Seed at 2011, hanging out with all you guys from a geek perspective. And you guys were, I think there was the $5 fines every time someone mentioned DAS, like you were talking about it that often. But I'm like,
I came up with it.
Yeah, you came up with that fine system. And I think there was a nice collect at the end because everyone was talking about DAS. But I'm like, and that's where I was saying to Christine, I said, that's why the CRM piece and the digital piece makes sense to get them all together in the same room, because all those three channels are funneling each other's future work and growth and path. So, if you're just staying in your track, if you use that as a term in your career and just looking at what's happening in your area and not seeing what's happening, then you're not really, you're not seeing where it might go, and I guess seeing some of the advantages and potentially what you've done in jumping from one to another, which is a bit like action hero style, jumping from one moving train onto another moving train at the same time at the different speeds. So congratulations on pulling it off.
Thank you.
I want to finish with the Sports Geek closing five. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
I have been thinking about this because it's like, I'm getting too old. My memory kind of ties together, and it's either
you can do the Wonder Year style amalgam where you can sort of smash two of them together. If the internet can't check it, no one will be fussed.
Right. Well, I won't tell the year. I know the opponents. It was. I remember going to Midsummer one time when I was like 8 or 9, I think, to a Red Sox Mariners game, and it was phenomenal. And I went to the Celtics against the Bullets, and the Bruins game against the Canadians, and just that was there was a number of things, and it was all within a 1 or 2 year cycle. So and like being in the old Boston Garden, where you're like, I remember our seats for each one of those things, because I was behind home plate for the Mariners game, those Sox Mariners. I was in the gallery in the garden for the.
And so that would have been in in the 80s, Larry Bird era.
Yeah, it was actually it was before Larry got signed. So there was a lot of tickets available. They weren't a good team at the time, right? So I was pretty close. And then the old Boston Garden was just a special place. I definitely miss it. So
yeah, it's one of my regrets that I never got to see a game at the old Boston Garden. But it's obviously a big reason why you you are a massive Boston fan to be following those, I guess, historic franchises and be able to see them up close.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you have a favorite food or go-to food or a favorite food memory at a sports event?
Totally beer and hot dog.
Beer and a hot dog. How many condiments on the hot dog? Do you load it up?
No, I'm ketchup and mustard, and I probably offend Clint Eastwood on that one, because he says you can only put mustard on a hot dog. But
no, I think I'll offend Clint Eastwood as well, and go the same way. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Oh, I'm old school. I definitely go with email. I was going to say MySpace, but
that would be old school. That would be old school, and you would be the first person to do that. But email, I can't bring myself. Like I try to get my emails probably the last thing, because I know I've got emails that will be there. They'll come in overnight, and I'll wake up. But I feel like once I open up email, that like the day starts. So I sort of want to just get a few things out of the way, whether it's sort of flick between LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter as my first. But yeah, I find and then I say, okay, now I'm going to set in. I'm going to clear my inbox at the start of the morning, but I don't like to do it first thing.
Right. So I did have best of intentions, and it worked really well for a month, and it fell off, and I so maybe when we're back together, you can ask me how I'm doing with this, because I was doing Headspace and just doing getting 10 minutes of meditation before I get started. I thought it was really helpful, and
I've been. So I recently read Hal Elrod's Morning Miracle, which is a good read, which effectively is get up and do somewhere between 10 minutes and 40 minutes of a morning ritual. And part of that, he's got 6 things. He terms them as lifesavers, but it's the savers piece. So silence, which is meditation, affirmations, visualizations, exercise, and scribing, so writing daily, doing a daily journal. So I've been doing that for the last couple of months. Now I haven't been ticking all of the boxes every day, but I have been testing out both Headspace and another app called Calm that I find really good. It's an Android app, and again, it takes a bit of getting used to, and the thing is, I keep hearing super successful people, whether they're famous or not famous, that sort of talk about meditation and really get into it, and to say it, calms the mind, and it does. But it's a daily practice. It's the same as exercising and that kind of thing. It's something you've got to work on.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm happy to be an accountability partner if you want to be doing that every day. You can just message me and say, "Yep, I've done it," and I'll reply back. Whatever it is, 15 hours later or before then, and say I've done it as well. So last but not least, what is your social media platform is your MVP?
Social media platform is MVP. It's Facebook, definitely Facebook. But I'm a lurker. I don't do a lot of posting, and I'll go on to Twitter for news and things like that. But it's just trying to train myself into getting to that next level. I do have like an Instagram account, but it's just like dragging into, it's like there's not another thing I need to look at. So I'm not like more of it. I'm trying to keep up with it to try to figure out, because I got teenage daughters. So I want to make sure that they're not getting to the dark side of the internet.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the thing is being a geek. And if you've taught your kids some geek skills like I have, they know how to hide their dad from their posts. So and then the other part of it is you also want them to be you want them to live their life and not be worried that you're watching all the time. So it's a bit of you want to watch over them and give them the space. So it's a challenge of being a digital dad, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really enjoyed it. Where can people find you on the internet if they wanted to connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn with at Steve _Conley, and on Facebook.
And you're in the
as I
sports biz Slack if people want to ping you.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to get you there. And so, thank you very much for coming on the show. I'm gonna have to organise another visit to Boston out to Fenway for next season, most likely. And because I absolutely enjoyed the last time I was there, and look forward to catching up with you soon.
Same here. And if you come, we'll definitely look forward to hosting you.
Want to start driving more revenue from digital? Go to sportsgeekcampaigns.com.
Thanks again to Steve Conley. You will find him on Twitter. He won't be tweeting, Steve_Conley. Or you can actually send him a message and tell him you listened if you're in the Sports Biz Slack community. S. Conley. You'll find him on Sports Biz Slack. Thanks very much, Steve, for both being a listener and a friend. And as always good to catch up and a good chat. I guess I wanted to just wrap up this podcast with a bit of an experiment that I'm doing. You might have seen me posting on LinkedIn asking if people wanted to help out and sort of tease out the idea. So the idea is a bit of a social experiment where I'm looking into what some of the current meme trends that are happening on the different platforms. And one that I have seen in my Facebook feed and is doing quite well is a very simple execution called Yes No, where they simply ask a simple question with the end, and then they ask a simple statement, I should say, and then they end with Yes No. So I wanted to test out whether that would work in sports, and then also see if that would work from a point of view of growing an audience and seeing if I can get engaged audience in that space. So it's a bit of a challenge to see if I can build out what would be known as a meme platform or a meme asset, but then also making sure that then actually analysing that asset and is it, as suspected, a 16 to 21-year-old type sports fan that are engaging on Facebook in this manner. That seems to be what I'm seeing on the Yes No page that I'm currently seeing. That they're the type of people. So it's a couple of ways you can be part of the experiment. You can simply nominate your sports Yes No by just going to the Google form. And I pretty much that's what I wanted. I wanted a wider array of sports in the US sports market and knowledge of the sports market. And then some people I'm more than happy to add people as editors to sort of learn my process around community management, especially the stuff that we do from an ads point of view. So this is, I guess, the secret sauce for us is to play around with the ads manager to see if we can get different engagement on different posts. And then the last bit is just, I guess, having your eyes over what we're doing from an ad execution and analysis point of view. I'll be running most of the ads with my team, but I'll be sharing all the learnings along the way in the private channel that we've got in the Sports Biz Slack. So don't expect it to be a lot of work for anyone who wants to join in. It's more of a learning exercise for everybody. At the moment, it's, I think, 7 days in. We've got an engaged audience of about 700 people in the US, and getting some good traction on a few different posts. So, if you're interested in that, I'm not going to share the link in the show notes because I'm trying to keep it a little bit private. But I can share you the details of the experiment. If you're already in the Sports Biz Slack, let me know. I'll share it with you there. And we'll be interested to see how it goes. So if you want to be part of it, even if you just want to look under the hood and sort of see how our process works around, I guess, community engagement and then also building audiences as well as tweaking things with ads, Facebook ads, and using the ad product. I think that's the secret sauce that we're looking for in this test. Not just doing it on pure content and organic reach, but where could an organic go with some ad money behind it? And again, not talking lots of lots of money in this case. But yeah, I'll be sharing all of the insights in a podcast, and who knows, it might be another content tactic that you can use on your page down the track. That's it. So yeah, if you want to contribute or join up, please send me a message, tweet me, hit me up on LinkedIn, or just send me a message if you're already in the Sports Biz Slack. If you're not in the Sports Biz Slack, simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/Slack and sign up, and send me a message. The sounds of the game for this episode come from last week's Melbourne Cup. Just as the race got started, the roar as the horses went past the crowd on the first lap at the famous Flemington Racecourse. So I will stay tuned for a full recap of the Spring Racing Carnival in a future episode, in some of the things that both I witnessed, and then looking behind the scenes of what they're doing from a digital sponsorship event activation point of view. But until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join over 1,000 sports business executives in Sports Biz Slack. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/Slack. Please leave an iTunes review for Sports Geek. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Find out how to drive between $8,000 and $30,000 in profit for each digital campaign you sell sponsors. Check out sportsgeekcampaigns.com. Just like Jimmy Butler, you can call Sean anytime at 61407-0407-200.
Stand by. And they're racing on the Melbourne Cup. Humidor jumped away only fairly and got a little bit of a rush. Single Gaze out well. Towards the inside, Max Dynamite midfield early. Johannes Vermeer out well. With Boom Time and also Ventura Storm. Max Dynamite behind them. Speed from the outside. Hartnell is coming over. With also Marmello, Sismontaine and Gallant is very deep on the track. So onto the course proper after they complete 400. Boom Time is the leader with Sismontaine and Gallant. Marmello behind them, followed by Johannes Vermeer, the inside of Hartnell. Max Dynamite about 7th on the rails. Then Al Mandan, who's 3 wide around Ventura Storm, rekindling on the fence. And then came Single Gaze. Next in the field is Big Duke between horses. Then came Bondi Beach, Wall of Fire. Emily Star is wide and 2/3 down from the barn. And they run past the junction and they will have to go. Red Carnival trying to slot in on the outside of Humidor. Then came Nikita. 2 further back in the field. Third